Apparently, the other day, there is a Twitter account called LGBTQ plus Goldsmiths that wanted to explain to everybody that gulags are actually really good things and it's okay. And they actually said sending a bigot to a gulag is actually a compassionate, nonviolent course of action. Gulags are bad things. What we heard about gulags is true. It's not a myth propagated by evil conspiracy spies to besmirch the good name of communism. It's just that communism didn't work. In almost every single instance, I believe in every instance, people who run the communist state end up becoming murderous dictators, okay? There are a few exceptions which aren't as bad. I think Cuba wasn't nearly as bad as, say, Russia. But look what the Soviet Union, I should say. Look what the Soviet Union did to, like, Ukraine. But let's read about what they say. And then I want to talk about how people absolutely love communism, and it's kind of coming back, and that is rather worrisome. So they said, here's a mini thread to clarify what a gulag is for those who only have heard it being used as a buzzword, and why sending a bigot to one is actually a compassionate, non-violent course of action. Oh, I had no idea. They said, so first of all, the USSR no longer exists, therefore gulags no longer exist. May as well make a case against Orientalism, but USSR does not equal Russia. Russia is not governed by a communist party. Got that? Okay, good. They said, gulags, first myth to debunk, you work until you die in gulags. The Soviets did away with life sentences, and the longest sentence was 10 years. Capital punishment was reserved for the most heinous and serious crimes. That's really interesting. I'm pretty sure they have work camps in North Korea. I don't care what you call them, but gulag typically refers to that. And if people are being punished and sent to go work for decades in a, whatever you want to call it, we'll call it a gulag, right? I don't understand how you can be like, no, the Soviet Union's gone. The communist countries still exist, and they still do the same thing. But no, you're wrong. It's compassionate. They say, the penal system was a rehabilitatory one and self-supporting, a far cry from the Western capitalist notion of prison. The aim was to correct and change the ways of criminals. If it couldn't be done in 10 years, it couldn't be done at all, which is interesting, but I will say, private prisons in the US, they suck. They are bad. I disagree with them, but it doesn't mean a gulag is better. It certainly isn't. Much like wider Soviet society, everyone who was able to work did so at a wage proportionate to those who weren't incarcerated, and as they gained skills were able to move up the ranks and work under less supervision. Educational work was also a prominent feature of the Soviet penal system. There were regular classes, book clubs, newspapers, editorial teams, sports theaters, and performance groups. There's so much more to add, but the reality is none of you actually care to learn about gulags. You don't care about what fascism actually is and how it is fueled by anti-communism, Orientalist myths, and lies propagated by the CIA. Long story short, friends, the ideas of TERFs and anti-trans bigots literally kill and must be eradicated through re-education. Science must be decolonized and de-essentialized in order for this to happen. It's a fascinating argument. They say that TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists, and anti-trans bigots literally kill. Okay, sure, there are people, yes, they absolutely do literally kill. But they said the ideas kill. So what they're implying is that when people spread these ideas, it leads to a small amount of people admittedly going off and committing murder. Right. The problem with that ideology is that China is literally doing this to Muslims. China believes that Muslims are leading, their ideology is a fundamentalist disease. They literally call it a disease. And they're putting Muslims in camps for re-education. That is not okay. Okay? People have a right to believe what they want to believe. They don't have a right to hurt people. That's a different story. But you can't take someone because of their ideas and lock them in a re-education center and just call it something nice. Right? This is you're just talking about it's authoritarianism with a smile, essentially. No, it's a rainbow and re-education to help bigots not kill people. Right? You can take it and shove it. I have a story for all of you. I have a friend who lives in Ukraine. She lives in an old Soviet-era block building, like this very dry and boring. It's an old communist building. It wasn't really they didn't take care of it very well. And she told me that at some point during the Soviet Union, one of her neighbors, her neighbors got into an argument with each other. She was not alive at this point. This was a long time ago. But there were two apartments and they were feuding. So one neighbor contacted the police and said, my neighbor is talking party things. She's insulting the party. And the next day, the neighbor was gone. And the apartment was empty. Because the police came in and said, you need re-education. We don't care if it's true. You're going to get locked up. And that's what was happening in the Soviet Union. They were so concerned about protecting their revolution that they didn't care if you were innocent. These are people who believe that it is better to punish the innocent. The saying is, It is better that 10 innocent suffer than one guilty go free. That's what they believe. As liberal democracies, we believe the opposite, that it is better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent suffer. Because when you create the system, what ends up happening, you have secret police showing up and saying, we don't care if they lied about you or not, you're getting locked up and you're gonna go work in a gulag. And then you have people today who are so pampered, so spoiled, they think that you should take people and put them in re-education centers. We know where this leads. This is really fascinating because it's not too dissimilar. Like, I'm going to go there. I'm going there, right? Godwin's law. What they're saying is that people should be put in re-education camps because it's humane, because it's actually compassionate to re-educate these people who defy their beliefs. Yeah, putting people in camps is always wrong. It was wrong when the US did it, it was wrong when the Soviets did it, and it was wrong when the Nazis did it. And you are not going to sit here and try and convince me of otherwise. You are an authoritarian, dare I say it, you are fascist. Granted, fascism typically denotes nationalism, so let me just say they're communists, self-admitted and proud, and acting like gulags are good things. We got a really funny response though. Someone said, such utter stupidity and crass ignorance. Just as well, no name is attached because you'd spend years living this one down. But Jamie Kirchick said, no, they wouldn't, David. They'd grow up to become leader of the Labour Party. That's basically the left in the UK. But I noticed something else. This is a story from just about a month and a half ago from Owen Jones. Condemn communists' cruelties, but capitalism has its own terrible record. What's really fascinating to me about the only argument against capitalism is that people happened to have died within the capitalist system. I had someone tell me, okay, I posted on Facebook, I asked, do you believe you have a right to own the fruits of your labor and freely trade it? And people were telling me that people were forced to work for others. And I'm like, no, you're not. You can literally just not work. No one, in the United States, you can literally just walk off into the middle of nowhere. You can literally trespass on federal property and probably no one's gonna do anything about it. I don't agree with the idea that they could if you're in the middle of the woods doing nothing. Sure, I understand there's, protecting wildlife and things like that. But if you don't want to work for somebody, go into the middle of the woods and survive. But there are people who said that's not fair, it's not true. And if people have to work to live, they don't have a choice. And I'm like, it's mind-blowing to me that you think people should have the freedom to not work. Well, food's got to come from somewhere, dude. Someone's got to make the food, build the houses. And what are you implying? That some people should be able to not do any work but still reap the benefits of other people's labor? It literally makes no sense. And surprisingly, these are the communists. And when you see these articles from someone like Owen Jones, where he's like, capitalism has its own terrible records, and he mentions slavery and other things, like, yes, slavery existed. But what do you think it was when the Soviets put people in gulags? Is that not the same thing? They restrict your freedom and force you to work? What about when North Korea puts people in camps? They restrict your freedom and force you to work. The mechanism by which we take away the freedom of an individual and force them to work is relevant, but it is much less relevant to the fact that capitalism and the governments we have are not identical, and our system that allows the individual the most freedom has ultimately led to realizing slavery is wrong and needs to be forbidden because it violates the rights of the individual. And the core of capitalism is that the individual has a right to control and freely trade their labor and the fruits of their labor as they see fit. When you realize that economic principle, people started to say, hey man, but how can you respect the individual's right to trade if you're taking away the rights of the individual? And thus the United States was born. And the Constitution, though this country was founded by people who absolutely were racist and did own slaves, because of the framework of their Constitution, eventually our Supreme Courts ruled, you know what we realized? Because of the way they explained this, the freedoms and independence of the individual, we have to uphold individual civil liberties. We have to grant people the right to marry who they love. We have to abolish slavery. We have to grant the right to vote. We have to do all these wonderful things. But communism is rooted in an ideology. And what ends up happening is authoritarians say, if at any point you disagree with the ideology, we lock you up. And the only argument that people have against communism is that people starved to death during during capitalism. People starved to death during communism because the government wouldn't let you do things. You couldn't go off and do something else. You couldn't even leave. In capitalism, you have a choice to grow your own food or starve. And you don't got to give that food to anybody else. If you grow corn, you get to eat it. In North Korea, not so much. When I was talking to this group in New Zealand, I did a story for Vice years ago. They drove their motorcycles through North Korea. And what they told me was that if an animal dies, the military comes in, takes it, divides it up for the entire country evenly. So you don't have a right to raise animals. You don't have a right to grow your own food. All the food you grow is divided amongst everyone. And that's not okay, because that means people who are trying to survive will do everything in their power to do so, and the fruits of their labor will be taken from them. And there are certain people who won't do whatever it takes to survive, who will be granted the fruits of others' labor and live off of it. There is a balance here. We don't want extreme, in my opinion, we don't want extreme laissez-faire capitalism, but we also don't want extreme socialism. We want something in the middle, where we say, look, everybody should pitch in to make sure our society continues to function, but overwhelmingly, the fruits of your labor, the choice as to how you sell your labor, all belongs to you. There are some people who say, yes, but what about those who have to work at McDonald's because they have no choice? Right. That sucks. But you still, as an American, you're still wealthy compared to the rest of the world. Working at Walmart, McDonald's, not the most glorious or glamorous jobs at all. But if it's the only thing you're good at and able to do, you're still able to live better than if you were on a farm working on your own. By all means, you can leave society and go somewhere else. And a lot of people are saying that's a terrible argument, it's BS, but no, the world does not guarantee you anything. You have to sustain your body to survive, and you can't blame capitalism, the fact that individuals work to receive their own benefits, on the fact that some people weren't able to do that. It just happens. People within communism want to make sure everyone can survive all the time, and I feel like that idea at least is noble. The idea that we shouldn't let anyone die, I understand that. But you can't cause other people to suffer and take from them because you remove their drive to actually survive. You're essentially punishing people who are fighting as hard as they can to make the world a better place by saying, it doesn't matter what you do, we're going to take it away. Anyway, there's a bunch of articles like this from people who try to play down the horrors of communism, and they're wrong. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for hanging out. If you didn't watch my first video, final warning to everybody, the storm's coming. Please take it very, very seriously. The last thing I want to hear is about, and I know it's going to happen, but I don't want to hear about injuries and death. So please, 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 please tell everyone to take it very, very seriously. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.